friends and tell them to join us. Maiyegun today. And thank you if you have done that already. So last night, we were anticipating what their court would say after all argument as well as false witnesses. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the IPOB, Indigenous People of Biafra, presented a no-case submission. No-case submission means that due to the process, a legal way, he was abducted, renditioned, they call it extraordinarily renditioned back to Nigeria, makes every legal move that is being embarked upon by this APC, Egbekegbe, so to say, is ultra fire, meaning it is not legal. So therefore, he had no case to answer. Well, this morning, when the court, resumed, the judge rejected that no submission case and ordered the legal team of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu to open their defense, as the prosecution have already closed their own case. So what that means now is that they would have to put up a defense to whatever it is that the prosecution presented, a case of or the charges of terrorism against Nnamdi Kanu. But his lawyers have a different kind of explanation for what really happened, because according to them, they rejected this no case submission simply because they said, despite the evidence presented to the court actually denied receiving the evidence that Nnamdi Kanu was renditioned back to Nigeria. So, in their defense, right, in order to still push for a no case, according to his legal team, they would then have to now present or represent this evidence back to the court. So we're going to go to that happened today, from the courtroom to the outside courtroom, add some level, some analysis to it in the middle, right? So first part, at least, let's see Mazi Nnamdi Kanu himself this morning in their court when he arrived, as well as when their case started or the court test started. So the first part.
You're taking this. How are you? Good to see you. How are you doing? I got a number. I just pray for my wife. It is well. It is well. Bless you, brother. Bless you. Thank you very much. That's a quick picture. I wonder.
So that was a brief clip of his arrival, as well as immediately after the court was in session. So Nnamdi Kanu was kidnapped from Kenya over 4 years ago, 27th of June, I think, 2021. And at the time, Bokwari was the presidiot of Nigeria. And it was more or less like a trophy for them, because not until when we realized how much resources Bokwari deployed in trying to kill Nnamdi Kanu, kill the Biafran, advocacy. That was when we get to know how serious this actually meant it to Bokwari, and it became the priority of the security agents in Nigeria. They did everything, and at the time, there was not any single unrest or insecurity issue that has to do with any form of armed groups in the eastern part of Nigeria. So they finally captured Nnamdi Kanu using a false intel, something that, okay, I think I shouldn't even use the word captured. It was then abducted by the Kenyan authority based on a false intel. A false intel, which was that Nnamdi Kanu was in Kenya to meet with the terrorists in Kenya, and therefore he is a threat to the national security of Kenya. So when the Kenyan secret police discovered that it was all a ruse, a lie, rather than let him go, they handed him over to the agents, Nigerian agents, who then put him on a private jet, drugged him enough to knock him out, and they flew him to Nigeria. When he got to Nigeria, the initial charges against Nnamdi Kanu by these rogues was that he was planning to topple Bokwari's government, as well as he was trying to break up Nigeria, which the second one is true, but not a crime. However, when they kidnapped him in 2021, they changed it to terrorism and so many other things that they kind of like muddled together. So for over 4 years now, the only evidence they could present in their own court are the publicly available videos of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's, broadcasts. So, but because in their own courts, right there in Nigeria, it was discharged and acquitted, right? This was like a year after he was kidnapped. In 2024, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu was discharged and acquitted. And it was told, they were told to return him back to wherever they abducted him from. Because the process of his arrest, which is an abduction, has sort of nullified every other legal step, or they have been struggling with their own laws and trying to twist their own court in order to just keep him there like a trophy. Like, okay, finally we got him. They celebrated the abduction of Nnamdi Kanu in northern part of Nigeria. More like, anything you could imagine. Like, they celebrated it. Nnamdi Kanu had nothing to do with them in the northern part of Nigeria. Nnamdi Kanu has no business with the northern part of Nigeria. And they are more worried. They are. I'm not saying all of the northern part of Nigeria this time. I'm talking about especially the Fulani terrorists and their apologists. Those who feels like an average Igbo person is a threat to them, as they are made to believe. But they celebrated it in northern part of Nigeria, to the point that Malamu announced the abduction of Nnamdi Kanu. He announced it in Hausa language, so that for the larger audience in northern part of Nigeria. Anyway, in their own court, they've actually in their own country with their own laws, they violated so many of their own laws with, reckless abandon, they'll call it, while they also deny him access to, proper medical care, which is another thing, though. Like if you say someone has committed a crime and you are prosecuting them, would you rather they die than they stay alive to be prosecuted? So we believe that the intention is not really to prosecute, it's called persecution. So Nnamdi Kanu was denied access to medical care despite concerning health issues. They still denied him. And that's part of what they discussed in their court today, by the way, in which the judge, Injustice or Motosho, right? In fact, let me break that down for you so that we don't muddle them up. So you see that part of no case submission, premising their argument on the fact that the process of his abduction, right, even as also kind of like a confirmed by their Supreme Court, that the entire process was wrong, and therefore, okay, he has no case. No Nigerian court should actually be trying him. You get what I mean? So the court said, according to the lawyer, so the court said no, they were not convinced. And what sort of conviction do the court need? They want evidence that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu was extraordinarily renditioned to Nigeria. Truly, that means he was kidnapped and bundled to Nigeria. So the court wants it in evidence. There is a federal high court judgment from Kenya, right, which is to even blame the Kenyan government on their role in abduction of Nnamdi Kanu. So their courts in Nigeria, Motosho was asking for evidence, and the lawyers were like, they presented their evidence, but they would have to represent the evidence this time around. So they need to prove that Nnamdi Kanu was properly brought to Nigeria, right? That he was properly extradited to Nigeria. So, but the lawyers have to prove that no, it wasn't. And the moment the court admit such evidence, so it is expected that the judge and even the court would have to recuse himself from the case. He would have no jurisdiction. That's what his lawyer said would happen. That would be if this whole thing is about law. We all know it's not about law, right? Here is lawyers.
Well, the ruling simply requires Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, the defendant, to enter his defense. It's not a pronunciation of guilt or not guilty. So that is why it's called a no-case submission. So the judge made a ruling that there's a prima facie evidence that needs to be explained. So in common parlance, it calls on him to come and mount his own defense. But there is the other aspect of the ruling that concerned extraordinary rendition. That very one is one that compounded us, because the extraordinary rendition of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is so open and notorious. Two international institutions or two separate panels of the United Nations have made pronouncements regarding his extraordinary rendition and called for his unconditional release. Nigeria is a member of the United Nations and therefore bound to consider that and implement that decision. And in Nigeria here, 3 courts have made similar pronouncements. First was by the Federal High Court of Umuahia, which awarded him 500 million naira. And the Court of Appeal also pronounced that he was a victim of extraordinary rendition. And in the Supreme Court, the same Supreme Court that sent this case back to trial, reached the same conclusion, that he was a victim of extraordinary rendition. And all these things are of the record. They are all in the file. And we remember when this trial was being conducted, these very documents were tendered in evidence. So it compounded us, it confused us that the court now made a pronouncement that the extraordinary rendition had no evidence before the court, that no evidence of it was submitted before the court. And you remember, least but not the last, recently a Kenyan High Court made the same pronouncement. But well, if the court was misled by believing by mistake that these things were not in the evidence, it also said and left the door open that such evidence be submitted. So we are coming back with that evidence, and it's going to be quantum and legion.
So what about the first application on the enemy?
Well, that one too, it wasn't in evidence that the Nigerian Medical Association has intervened. So it came as a surprise. Well, there's a short date given of 8 days for the NMA to submit its report. So somebody is ill, I don't think NAA is going to change much of that. But I think the judge wanted to leave the record open to admit every possible evidence regarding this matter. But meantime, we are disappointed. Our client remains ill and remains detained. And we're not happy about that. His situation requires urgent and emergent care. So whatever the court says today does not mean that the government shall withdraw back. Just 2 days ago, I wrote a letter. A private hospital has also expressed readiness to admit him here in Abuja. For security reasons, I won't mention the name of the private hospital. But the government, if the government appears to have issues with taking him to the national hospital, we have given them an option of a private hospital also here in Abuja.
So it's safe to say that the application to be transferred to the national hospital was rejected?
No. Rejected? No, it's pending. Yes.
One other information.
It hasn't been rejected. It's pending. It's pending the admission of this report from the Nigerian Medical Association and the opinion of the Nigerian Medical Association. And if you were in court, the judge had ordered that the committee or panel to be considered by the Nigerian Medical Association shall have a member from the National Hospital. So National Hospital is still in play.
One other information, please. One other information. We are saying that the judge has no jurisdiction whatsoever to try Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, because that particular issue of being a victim of extraordinary rendition must be determined, and that one will be whether they will be the one that will confer jurisdiction on the court. And the court said there is no evidence before him. Now we are going to supply evidence before him that Nnamdi Kanu was extraordinary rendition. Then, having done that, there is no case to answer. So that you should go home with that. And if they fail to do otherwise, we will not see it as a war against the Igbos.
Yeah, you have to sprinkle that into it. If you have a case against someone and it is watertight case, I don't think it should take about 4.5 years. Oh, hang on, not 4.5 years. I don't think it should take over 10 years. Do you know that since APC, Abducted, came to power from December 2015, they have been after this Nnamdi Kanu. So by December this year, it is going to be exactly 10 years. It will be 10 years since APC, Abducted, unleashed terror on the Biafrans. At least, I don't think it should take 10 years. It should, if you have real evidence. But the bottom line is that, no, it is not about prosecuting him. It is either to get him killed or lock him up for as long as they want, until somebody else will now come in and just be like, oh yeah, you know what? We are sorry for the way you are treated. Okay, sorry about that. Please, just go. And that is why the Eastern governors have been talking about political solution, because they are raising the issue of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu in gatherings like just side talk. But they are making it, they want to make everyone believe that, oh, we are having discussion with the highest authority. So the government of Nigeria ensured that there is a judicial compromise, manipulation enough, that their law doesn't really matter. Somebody is in the custody of the DSS. And why is that? And then the Nigerian DSS is not supposed to be like a, a withholding agency, if not because of this abuse of power that has become. So then the court became so powerless before the DSS that the request to transfer him away from these criminals, right, was completely rejected. Okay, fine. For whatever reason that you had to do, I mean, you had